Welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. Stay informed with quick, easy-to-listen summaries of our latest articles, perfect for when you're on the go. No reading required. Subscribe for free at mercola.com for the latest health insights.
Hello and welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I'm Ethan Foster, and today we're covering an important report about the sugars found in most infant formulas in the U.S. The data comes from a new study published in the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis, and it highlights how these added sugars could undermine healthy development for infants. We'll walk through the core findings, discuss the potential health effects, and explore possible solutions.
Thank you, Ethan. It's an eye-opening study that reveals most infant formulas on the market don't rely on naturally occurring lactose. Instead, they primarily use added sugars like corn syrup solids, fructose, or glucose. According to the research, infants who rely solely on formula may consume up to 60 grams of added sugars daily. That's roughly the sugar equivalent of 2 soft drinks in a single day.
It's startling to consider that 73 formulas were examined, and only 5 had naturally occurring lactose as their main carbohydrate source. Based on this study, those 5 are no longer available in the U.S. This means that most parents who rely on formula might have no choice but to purchase products that contain a large amount of added sugars. Let's talk about why that matters for an infant's health.
The researchers point out multiple risks associated with excessive added sugar in formula. First, there's a concern about rapid weight gain, which can lead to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular issues later in life. There's also the development of a strong preference for sweet foods. If a baby becomes accustomed to higher sugar levels early on, they may overconsume sweet foods as they grow.
And that's not the only problem. Added sugars don't carry the same nutritional or developmental benefits found in lactose. Lactose comes naturally from breast milk, as well as from cow and goat milk, and it supports infant nutrition in multiple ways. Because lactose digests more slowly, it doesn't trigger the same rapid blood sugar spikes that can pave the way for metabolic issues. It also helps with mineral absorption, which is important for bone health.
Another key point from the study is that lactose helps cultivate beneficial gut bacteria, which are critical for a healthy immune system. Added sugars, on the other hand, lack those benefits. Dr. David Ludwig, an endocrinologist involved in some of the earlier research on sugar-sweetened beverages, called the use of added sugars in infant formula a metabolic nightmare. His view is that replacing lactose with fast-digesting sugars strips away the advantages that lactose offers while creating new risks.
Clearly, the predominant presence of added sugars in infant formula raises questions about how these products are regulated. Unlike adult food items, infant formulas in the U.S. aren't required to list their added sugar content separately. Parents only see total carbohydrates on the label, which can be misleading if they assume all carbs come from lactose.
Exactly. The FDA has specific requirements for 30 nutrients in infant formula, but they don't regulate the type of carbohydrates. This means manufacturers can use virtually any carbohydrate source, starches, corn syrup, or other added sugars, without having to disclose that information beyond the total carbohydrate figure. The University of Kansas researchers stress how significant this information gap is for caregivers trying to make informed decisions.
It's a tough situation because many parents either cannot breastfeed or may not have consistent access to breast milk. While breast milk remains the best source of nutrients for infants, real-world obstacles like limited parental leave or lack of affordable childcare force families to rely partially or entirely on formula. Given that scenario, it's crucial that formulas align more closely with the nutritional profile of human milk.
That's where the researchers recommend 2 primary strategies. First, they advise requiring formula companies to use naturally occurring lactose instead of added sugars. They emphasize that infant formula should reflect the lactose levels found in human milk. Second, they suggest removing societal barriers to breastfeeding. They mention that focusing solely on promoting breastfeeding without addressing systemic challenges places an unfair burden on families.
Indeed. Those barriers include workplace policies, the lack of robust parental leave, and limited support for nursing parents. Without changes in these areas, it's unrealistic to expect everyone to successfully breastfeed exclusively, especially if they face economic or logistical constraints. As a result, the study's authors argue it's imperative for formula products themselves to be healthier.
To underscore the urgency, they reference other investigations revealing high sugar levels in certain baby foods. The researchers note a news story from less than a year ago, showing some well-known global baby food brands had high amounts of added sugars too. It appears to be a widespread issue, not limited to just U.S. infant formulas.
This broader pattern raises questions about how we approach infant nutrition at the policy level. The study emphasizes that children under 2 years old shouldn't be introduced to added sugars at all, in line with recommendations by pediatric groups and the dietary guidelines for Americans. Yet the market, as it currently exists, offers few low-sugar formula options.
Correct, and the data show that many formulas marketed with labels like gentle, soothe, or sensitive don't necessarily contain less sugar. In some cases, they contain more starch. The overarching problem is that these products don't focus on lactose as the main carbohydrate source. Consequently, parents who want to reduce added sugar may find themselves choosing formulas that replace sugar with starch, which still doesn't provide lactose's long-term health advantages.
The conversation underscores why consumer awareness is key. If labels aren't transparent, caregivers may not realize how much sugar their infants consume. Although total carbohydrates are listed, the distinction between naturally occurring lactose and added sugar remains hidden. In effect, it becomes nearly impossible for the average parent to determine the product's real contents.
Precisely. The researchers call for better policy interventions, stating that consumers are blinded to the fact that added sugars may be present in infant formulas, and in what quantities. Their ultimate goal is a formula market that doesn't compromise infant health by including so many added sugars. Given that the federal government and health organizations have clear dietary guidelines, the presence of these formulas stands in direct conflict with such advice.
The study also touches on the relationship between early diet and later health outcomes. Rapid infant weight gain is a known risk factor for obesity, and added sugar in formula could be part of that equation. Furthermore, shaping a preference for sweetness can lead children to resist more balanced foods later on, potentially influencing their eating habits well into adulthood.
It's a chain reaction. When babies develop a strong affinity for sweet foods, they may gravitate toward them in childhood and beyond, potentially increasing the risk of chronic health issues. This is why the authors are so concerned about the standard U.S. formula market. They see these hidden sugars as a significant contributor to future metabolic problems, rather than a neutral or benign ingredient.
If we step back and look at the big picture, it becomes clear that trusting families to read labels alone isn't enough. Without requirements for clear labeling of added sugars, many parents won't know what they're feeding their babies. That's why the researchers and various health professionals emphasize policy changes that push for lactose-based formulas whenever medically feasible.
And while breastfeeding might be ideal, the study's authors acknowledge that it's not always practical, especially given modern work constraints. It's a multi-layered issue. Encouraging families to breastfeed without providing the structural support they need to do so full-time doesn't solve the dilemma. Plus, supplemental formula is often used by breastfeeding parents for numerous reasons, so having a healthier formula is essential in those cases too.
One of the main takeaways is that American families need more transparent information. Formulas are crucial for many households, and the current situation places them in a difficult spot. The small number of formulas that once used mostly lactose have vanished from the U.S. market. Now, caregivers may feel they have no genuine low-sugar option at their disposal.
Exactly. The researchers consider this a systemic issue. They highlight how individual-level solutions, like telling parents to just breastfeed, fail to address the broader market and regulatory challenges. If the typical formula is packed with added sugars, parents seeking alternatives can't easily find them. The study urges stakeholders to consider both short-term and long-term changes, from immediate policy shifts to expanded parental support systems.
Ultimately, it's about safeguarding the next generation's health. The study from the University of Kansas reinforces what many dietitians and pediatricians have emphasized. Infants should receive carbohydrates primarily from lactose. The conversation goes beyond immediate nutrition. It's about shaping taste preferences, metabolism, and overall wellness from the very beginning of life.
Precisely. The findings serve as a wake-up call for anyone interested in children's health. With the majority of parents needing formula at some point, We should demand transparency in labeling. We should also advocate for more stringent regulations that prevent added sugars from dominating infant formulas. If the guidelines recommend 0 added sugars for children under 2, it seems logical that formulas should comply with that principle.
Well said, Ilara. That concludes our discussion on how most infant formulas in the U.S. contain added sugars and the implications of that reality. The evidence points to a need for policy reforms, better labeling practices, and broader support for breastfeeding families. Thank you for joining us on Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. I'm Ethan Foster, and with me has been my co-host, Ilara Sky. We appreciate you listening, and we'll be back next time with more insights on health and wellness.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.